Have you ever stopped to think about how it all began? Not just the world, but everything, life, existence, and even our purpose. The book of Genesis doesn't just introduce the Bible, it lays the foundation for understanding God's plan for the world and for us. In this video, we'll walk through each chapter of Genesis, reflecting on its timeless lessons and why they still hold meaning for us today. Let's take this journey together. Before the stars, the oceans, or even time itself, Genesis takes us to the very beginning. The world is a blank canvas, a vast, silent emptiness waiting for something incredible. Then God speaks, "Let there be light." Suddenly, the darkness is shattered, and the first day begins. Light and darkness are separated, setting the rhythm of day and night. It's more than just light being created, it's order emerging from chaos. Have you ever thought about why light came first? It's like God was showing us that clarity and direction must come before anything else. On the second day, God speaks again and shapes the heavens. He separates the waters above from the waters below, creating the endless expanse we call the sky. Picture a perfect cloudless blue stretching infinitely, a reminder of God's greatness and the space He created for life to flourish. The sky isn't just scenery, it's where rain will nourish the earth and where birds will someday fill the air with song. Have you ever looked up at the sky and felt small yet comforted, knowing it reflects God's infinite reach? By the third day, the earth begins to form as dry ground appears. Imagine waters pulling back to reveal continents and islands, each one teeming with possibility. Then God commands the earth to sprout vegetation. Green shoots burst through the soil, spreading into fields of grass, tall trees, and vibrant flowers. Every tree bears fruit, each one packed with seeds to continue the cycle of life. Can you picture that first earth, untouched, perfect, and brimming with beauty? It's as if God is painting a masterpiece, with every detail adding to the wonder of His creation. On the fourth day, God fills the heavens with lights to govern the day and night. The sun takes its place as a source of warmth and energy, while the moon reflects a softer glow for the evening. Then there are the stars, countless and scattered across the heavens, each one placed with care. These lights don't just illuminate, they mark time and seasons, reminding us of the order and precision in God's creation. Think about it. Every sunrise, every starry night is a reminder of God's constant presence and the rhythm He has woven into the fabric of creation. Doesn't it make you wonder how every detail was so perfectly planned? Day 5 is a burst of life as God fills the skies and seas with creatures. Imagine schools of fish swimming gracefully through the oceans, dolphins leaping joyfully, and colorful birds spreading their wings across the skies. Each creature has its own song, its own purpose, adding harmony to the world. The seas are teeming with energy, and the skies are alive with motion. Have you ever listened to the sound of waves or the call of a bird and felt a sense of awe? It's a glimpse of that original symphony of creation, a reminder of the life God breathes into His world. Then comes day 6, the pinnacle of creation. God creates land animals of every kind. The earth begins to buzz with activity as lions roam majestically, deer graze peacefully, and elephants move with strength and purpose. Each animal is perfectly suited to its environment, showcasing God's creativity and care. But this isn't the end. God has one final extraordinary act of creation. He says, "Let us make mankind in our image." With those words, humanity is born. God forms Adam from the dust of the ground and breathes life into him. Imagine that moment, the creator of the universe personally shaping humanity with His own hands. But God doesn't stop there. Seeing that Adam needs a companion, He creates Eve from Adam's rib, crafting her with the same love and intention. Together, they are placed in Eden, a paradise beyond imagination. Rivers flow with crystal clear water, trees are heavy with fruit, and flowers fill the air with fragrance. It's a place of beauty, peace, and purpose, where Adam and Eve walk side by side with God Himself. Eden is more than just a garden. It's a picture of how life was meant to be. There's no fear, no shame, only harmony. Adam and Eve are entrusted with the care of creation, given the responsibility to nurture and steward the world. Their relationship with God is close, personal, and unbroken. Can you picture walking with God in the cool of the day, hearing His voice, and knowing you are fully loved? It's a glimpse of the intimacy we were created for. But even in this perfect paradise, God introduces a choice. He commands Adam and Eve not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This isn't about restriction, it's about trust. God is inviting them to choose His way, to depend on Him rather than their own understanding. Have you ever thought about how trust is at the heart of every relationship, even ours with God? Chapter 3 brings a turning point for the human race, where the peace of Eden is quickly lost and paradise fades away. The serpent, cunning and deceitful, enters the story, questioning God's words and planting doubt in Eve's mind. Did God really say? He asks, twisting the truth and making her question God's goodness. She looks at the fruit, sees that it's desirable, and takes a bite. Adam follows, and in that moment, their eyes are opened. But what they see isn't wisdom. It's their own nakedness, their vulnerability, and their shame. For the first time, fear enters the world. Adam and Eve hide from God, their close relationship with Him now fractured. When God calls out, "Where are you?" it's not because He doesn't know. He's giving them a chance to come back to Him, to confess and seek His mercy. But fear and guilt have taken root, and instead of taking responsibility, Adam blames Eve, and Eve blames the serpent. The consequences are devastating. The serpent is cursed, and a promise is made one day a descendant of Eve will crush his head, though the serpent will strike at his heel. For Eve, pain and struggle enter her life, especially in childbirth and her relationship with Adam. For Adam, work becomes a laborious task, and the ground resists him. Death, the ultimate consequence, becomes a reality. Paradise is lost, and Adam and Eve are sent out of Eden. Yet, even in judgment, there's a glimpse of hope. God provides garments to cover their shame and guards the tree of life, preventing them from living forever in their fallen state. The ripple effects of sin are seen in chapter 4 with Cain and Abel. Cain's jealousy leads to the first murder, and when God confronts him, his defiance echoes through history, "Am I my brother's keeper?" This story reminds us of the devastating impact of sin, not just on individuals, but on families, communities, and creation itself. Yet God's mercy is still evident as He marks Cain for protection, showing that even in punishment, He does not abandon His people. Chapter 5 takes us through generations from Adam to Noah. It's a record of lifespans and names, but it's more than a genealogy. It's a testimony of humanity's journey. Each name represents a life lived in a world far from Eden, a world burdened by sin, but not without hope. Enoch, a man who walks faithfully with God, is taken up to heaven, a beacon of hope that reminds us that closeness with God is still possible. And then we meet Noah, a man who finds favor with God in a world descending into darkness. These first chapters of Genesis aren't just about the past, they're about us. They show us the beauty we were created for, the brokenness of sin, and the relentless mercy of a God who never gives up on His creation. As we continue through Genesis, we'll see how this story unfolds, revealing a God who is always working to bring His people back to Him. Have you ever wondered what this means for your own journey with God? Stay with me, because the story is just getting started. As we dive into Genesis chapter 6, imagine a world that's falling apart. Remember the peace and beauty of God's creation? It was a place where every living thing thrived, carefully designed by a loving Creator. But now, that peace has vanished. The Bible tells us every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Picture living in a world where violence is everywhere, selfishness rules, and people turn away from God. It's a sad and troubling scene that deeply grieves God. He created everything out of love and purpose, and seeing it fall into corruption and sin makes him very sad. In the middle of all this darkness, one man stands out, Noah. The Bible describes him as righteous, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. This doesn't mean Noah was perfect. None of us are. But it does mean Noah chose to live differently. While everyone around him turned away from God, Noah stayed faithful. His life shines as a beacon of hope and integrity in a world full of corruption. It shows us that even in the darkest times, we can choose to walk with God, showing obedience and trust. Then God speaks to Noah with a plan that must have seemed unbelievable. He tells Noah that he's going to send a flood to cleanse the earth of its wickedness. But there's hope. Noah, his family, and representatives of every kind of creature will be saved. Imagine hearing this from God when there's no sign of rain. God instructs Noah to build an ark, a massive boat designed to withstand the coming flood. He gives Noah detailed instructions about its size, the type of wood to use, and its dimensions. This wasn't just any project, it was a divine mission with precise requirements, showing how serious and inevitable the flood was. Building the ark wasn't easy. It took years of hard work, dedication, and unwavering faith. Every day, Noah faced the challenge of constructing this enormous vessel. People around him probably thought he was crazy, watching him build something that seemed impossible. Despite the ridicule and doubt, Noah kept going, trusting in God's promise. His work on the ark wasn't just about building a boat, it was about building his faith, showing what it means to trust God even when things don't make sense. As Noah worked on the ark, we see God's faithfulness shining through. Day by day, Noah trusted God's word, relying on his guidance instead of what he could see around him. When the ark was finally complete, Noah took on the monumental task of gathering his family and pairs of every living creature. This wasn't just obedience, it was stewardship. Noah was preserving life, reflecting God's care for all creation. The variety of animals in the ark shows the wide reach of God's salvation plan, covering every part of creation. Then comes a striking moment: the Lord shut him in. This simple act shows God's protective care. It's more than just keeping Noah safe from the flood. It's about being held securely by a loving Creator. The ark becomes a sanctuary, a refuge where Noah and his family are preserved, not by their own efforts, but by God's provision. It's a powerful reminder that God protects those who are faithful, balancing His justice with His mercy. When the rains start, the earth is quickly overwhelmed by the flood. The springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. Imagine the sheer force of the water rising, covering everything. The storm is loud and relentless, turning the landscape into a vast sea. Mountains disappear, and all life outside the ark is swept away. It's a stark reminder that sin has serious consequences and that God's patience has its limits. But inside the ark, there's a stark contrast. Amidst the chaos outside, the ark remains calm and safe. Noah, his family, and the animals are secure, not because of the ark's construction, but because of God's protection. This sanctuary within the storm is like a symbol of salvation, showing how divine intervention can provide refuge even in the most dire circumstances. The ark is a place where God's presence is felt, where faith and obedience lead to safety and the continuation of life. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rains keep pouring, and the waters remain for 150 days. This long period signifies a complete cleansing of the earth, wiping away the corruption that had taken hold. The floodwaters eventually begin to recede, and the ark rests on the mountains of Ararat, marking the end of the flood and the start of a new chapter for creation. Noah sends out a raven and then a dove to check if the land is dry. When the dove returns with an olive leaf, it's a hopeful sign of new life and peace after destruction. After a year in the ark, it's time for Noah and his family to step into a cleansed world. Imagine the relief and gratitude as they breathe in fresh air and see a renewed earth. Noah's first act is one of worship. He builds an altar and offers sacrifices to the Lord. This act of gratitude isn't just personal, it's a communal acknowledgement of God's saving grace. In response, God makes a covenant with Noah and all of creation, promising never again to destroy the earth with a flood. This promise is sealed with the sign of a rainbow in the sky. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures. The rainbow isn't just a beautiful natural phenomenon. It's a powerful symbol of God's mercy and faithfulness. It reminds us that God keeps his promises and works to renew and restore even when we falter. The story of the flood isn't just about judgment, it's about renewal and hope. God wasn't giving up on humanity. He was giving us a fresh start. Noah's faith shows us what it means to trust God, even when his plans don't make sense. It reminds us that obedience, even when it's hard or seems foolish to others, can lead to God's greatest blessings. Today, this story is still incredibly relevant. The ark symbolizes refuge and salvation, much like the salvation offered through Jesus Christ. Just as Noah found safety in the ark during the storm, we find protection and eternal life through faith in Christ, who saves us from the storms of sin and judgment. The flood reminds us of the consequences of sin, highlighting that while God's patience is immense, it's not endless. This calls us to live lives of faith and obedience, striving to walk with God like Noah did, even when the world around us doesn't. And the rainbow? It's a lasting reminder that God's promises never change. In a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, the rainbow points us back to a God who keeps his word. It reassures us that despite the turmoil around us, God remains faithful, working to renew and restore creation even when humanity falls short. The covenant with Noah is just the beginning of God's plan to redeem his creation. As we continue through Genesis, we'll see how this promise unfolds, connecting each story to the hope of restoration and God's ever-present love. So, what can we take away from Noah's story today? It reminds us that even when the world around us is falling apart, we can choose to stand firm in our faith. Noah trusted God's plan, even when it didn't make sense to others, and God honored that trust by saving him and his family. This encourages us to hold on to our faith, knowing that God is always faithful to his promises. The rainbow remains a powerful symbol for us today. Every time we see one, it's a reminder of God's everlasting covenant and his promise to never again destroy the earth with a flood. It reassures us that God is working to renew and restore, even when things seem bleak. Just as Noah found refuge in the ark, we find our salvation and hope in Jesus Christ, who offers us eternal life and protection from the storms of life. In our daily lives, Noah's story teaches us about obedience and trust. Building the ark was a huge task that took years, much like the challenges we face today. Whether it's dealing with personal struggles, societal issues, or global crises, Noah's unwavering faith inspires us to trust God's plan and remain faithful, no matter how tough things get. The flood narrative also calls us to be good stewards of creation. Just as Noah cared for the animals in the ark, we are called to care for the world God has entrusted to us. This means taking responsibility for our environment, treating animals with kindness, and ensuring that we live in harmony with all living things. Ultimately, Noah's story is a testament to God's justice and mercy. It shows us that while God does judge sin, he is also deeply committed to saving and restoring. This balance of justice and mercy is something we see throughout the Bible and something we can hold on to in our faith journey today. As we continue exploring Genesis and the rest of the Bible, keep Noah's story in mind. Let it inspire you to live faithfully, trust in God's plans, and embrace the hope of renewal and restoration that He offers. Noah's journey from a righteous man in a corrupted world to the father of a renewed creation is a powerful reminder of the transformative power of faith and obedience. It's a story that continues to speak to us, offering lessons and hope for our own lives as we walk faithfully with God. As we continue in Genesis, humanity begins to spread across the earth. Families grow and communities form, and soon these groups start settling in different regions, creating new languages and cultures. Chapter 10 gives us a genealogy often called the Table of Nations. Here we see the descendants of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth filling the earth, each family line becoming the roots of different nations. These verses reveal that despite the flood and the renewed covenant with Noah, humanity's diversity grows, scattering like seeds planted across the soil of a new world. But within this growth lies a deeper challenge, a human desire for unity, for greatness, and ultimately for control. This desire becomes the center of chapter 11 as we encounter one of the most mysterious and intriguing stories in Genesis, the Tower of Babel. The people settle in a plain in the land of Shinar, a fertile place with vast resources. Here they gather, united by a single language and a shared vision. And as they look around at the wide open land and the skies above, a thought takes root in their hearts. Let us build a city for ourselves, with a tower that reaches to the heavens. It's a bold ambition, a plan to make their name great. But this isn't just a tower or a city, it's a symbol of pride, of humanity's desire to be equal with God. Imagine the scene, thousands of people working together, mixing bricks, lifting stones, driven by a shared purpose. There's a sense of excitement, of determination. Each day, the tower grows taller, reaching higher, becoming a monument to human strength and unity. This tower is a statement, a way of saying, we don't need God, we can achieve greatness on our own. But as the tower rises, so does their pride. In their pursuit of greatness, they forget the Creator who made them, the one who gave them the ability to build and dream. The tower becomes not just a structure, but an idol, a place where they worship their own power and ambition. And then, in a pivotal moment, God comes down to see what they are building. This isn't just a casual observation, it's a divine intervention. God sees the tower, the city, the unity of the people, and He understands the danger in their ambition. United by pride, they are losing sight of their dependence on Him. This tower, this pursuit of greatness, threatens to lead them further away from the purpose for which they were created. So God, in His wisdom, decides to act. He confuses their language, creating a multitude of dialects and tongues. Imagine the chaos that follows. A bustling city where, in a single moment, people can no longer understand each other. One worker calls for more bricks, but his partner only hears an unfamiliar sound. Instructions are misunderstood, tools are dropped, frustration mounts, and soon, work grinds to a halt. The people, unable to communicate, abandon the tower and scatter across the earth. What was once a symbol of their unity becomes a monument to their division. The tower stands unfinished, a reminder of the limits of human ambition. And the place is named Babel, which means confusion, because there God confused the language of the whole world. But this story of Babel isn't just about ancient history, it's a story that resonates even today. Humanity's desire for greatness, for independence, is a theme that continues to shape our world. We build towers of our own, structures, systems, achievements that make us feel powerful, that make us think we're in control. But Babel reminds us that pride has consequences, that there's a limit to human ambition when it's disconnected from God. In scattering the people, God isn't punishing them in anger, He's guiding them back to their purpose. By creating different languages, he's reminding humanity of their dependence on him, of the beauty in diversity, and of the importance of humility. The story of Babel is a call to remember that while we are capable of great things, our true greatness is found in our relationship with God, not in our own strength. As we move forward in Genesis, we see that the scattering of the nations and the creation of languages is not the end of God's plan, but a part of it. Through this scattering, God prepares the way for a new chapter in his relationship with humanity. And from the scattered nations, God will soon call a single man through whom he will begin a covenant that will eventually bless all people. The Tower of Babel serves as both a warning and a promise. It warns us of the dangers of pride, of placing our ambition above our faith. But it also promises that God's purpose will prevail, even in our confusion and brokenness. Through every language, every culture, and every scattered nation, God's desire to be in relationship with his creation remains. As we continue our journey through Genesis, remember the story of Babel. Remember that while humanity may build towers and seek greatness, true fulfillment comes from walking humbly with our Creator, and soon we will meet a man who answers God's call, not with a tower, but with a tent, a journey of faith that will shape the future of nations. Now let's dive into one of the most central stories in the Bible, the journey of Abram. Imagine yourself in ancient Ur, a bustling city in Mesopotamia. The skyline was dominated by towering ziggurats, step towers that served as both religious centers and symbols of the city's power. These structures, resembling flat-topped pyramids, had temples at their peaks where people worshipped their gods, believing them to be bridges between earth and the heavens. Vibrant markets buzzed with activity, and countless idols lined the streets and homes, reflecting the city's deep devotion to its many deities. This was Abram's world, a culture steeped in idolatry and grandeur, yet far from the God who would call him into an extraordinary covenant. Abram, who would later become Abraham, was a man comfortably settled into this lively city. He had wealth, a large family, and strong traditions that kept him grounded. One ordinary day, everything changed. God called Abram with a message that would transform his life and shape the future of countless generations. "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you," God said. Imagine the weight of that moment, a man asked to leave everything familiar and step into the unknown. It's like being told to leave your home, your friends, and everything you know to move to a completely new place with no guarantees. Abram didn't hesitate. He gathered his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all their possessions, setting out on a journey of faith. This decision wasn't easy. It meant leaving behind everything he knew and trusting God's promise without knowing where he was headed. As they traveled, Abram's faith was tested repeatedly, but his trust in God remained steadfast. The journey to Canaan was long and filled with uncertainty. When they finally arrived in the land of promise, God spoke to Abram again, reaffirming that this land would belong to his descendants. To show his gratitude and trust, Abram built an altar, a simple structure where he could worship God. This wasn't just a ritual, it was a heartfelt expression of his faith and reliance on God's promise. But life in Canaan wasn't smooth. A severe famine hit the land, making it difficult to survive. Abram had to make a tough decision. To find food and safety, he decided to go to Egypt, a land known for its abundance. This move was another leap of faith, stepping into another unknown territory. In Egypt, Abram's faith was tested further. Worried that people would kill him to take Sarai because of her beauty, he asked her to say she was his sister. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, took Sarai into his palace, believing she was Abram's sister. But God didn't let anything bad happen. He sent plagues on Pharaoh's household, revealing the truth about Sarai. Pharaoh realized that Sarai was Abram's wife and returned her to him, letting them leave Egypt safely. Even when Abram made a mistake, God's faithfulness never wavered. This experience taught Abram a valuable lesson about trusting God fully, even in difficult situations. It showed that God protects and cares for those who are faithful to Him. Back in Canaan, Abram faced a new challenge. Both he and Lot had become very wealthy, with large herds of livestock. This growth led to tension between their herdsmen, causing conflict. Seeking peace, Abram decided to offer Lot the first choice of land. Lot chose the lush plains of the Jordan Valley near Sodom, attracted by its fertility and beauty. Abram, trusting in God's provision, stayed in the hill country. This decision highlighted Abram's quiet strength and faith. He chose to follow God's plan rather than what looked good on the surface. But Lot's choice led to trouble. A coalition of kings waged war in the region, capturing Lot and his possessions. When Abram heard the news, he didn't hesitate. He gathered 318 trained men and launched a daring nighttime rescue mission to save Lot. With God's help, Abram defeated the invaders and brought Lot back safely. This act of bravery and faith demonstrated Abram's deep trust in God's protection. It wasn't just about rescuing his nephew, it was about standing up for what was right and trusting that God would help him through tough times. After rescuing Lot, Abram met Melchizedek, the king of Salem and priest of God Most High. Melchizedek blessed Abram, and in return, Abram gave him a tenth of everything. This encounter was rich with meaning. Melchizedek's blessing and Abram's generosity foreshadow the coming of Christ, the eternal priest-king who intercedes for us. Abram's refusal to take even a thread from the king of Sodom showed his integrity and reliance on God as his provider. It wasn't about personal gain, but about honoring God's provision and blessings. Despite these victories, Abram still had no child, and the promise of many descendants felt distant. God reassured him, saying, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward." Abram expressed his doubt, asking, "What can you give me since I remain childless?" God took Abram outside and showed him the stars, promising that his offspring would be as numerous as the heavens. Abram believed, and God credited it to him as righteousness. This powerful declaration showed that faith, not works, is the foundation of our relationship with God. It's about trusting God's promises, even when they seem impossible. To seal this promise, God instructed Abram to prepare a sacrifice. As night fell, a smoking firepot and blazing torch passed between the pieces, symbolizing God's unbreakable commitment to the covenant. God also revealed that Abram's descendants would spend 400 years in slavery in a foreign land, but would eventually come out with great possessions. This prophecy was fulfilled in the Exodus, showing that God's plans often unfold through both trials and deliverance. It teaches us that even when we face hardships, God is still working on His promises for us. Years passed, and Sarai still was without a child. In her frustration, she suggested that Abram have a child through her maidservant, Hagar. This decision was common in their culture, but introduced tension into their household. Hagar became pregnant with Ishmael and began to despise Sarai, leading to conflict. Feeling mistreated, Hagar fled into the wilderness, where she encountered an angel of the Lord. The angel comforted her, promising that her son would become the father of a great nation. Naming God El Roi, the God who sees, Hagar returned and gave birth to Ishmael. However, this attempt to fulfill God's promise through human effort brought complications that would affect future generations. 13 years later, when Abram was 99 years old, God appeared to him again, reaffirming and expanding His covenant. God introduced Himself as God Almighty and called Abram to live blamelessly, promising to fulfill the covenant by greatly multiplying his descendants. In this encounter, God changed Abram's name to Abraham, meaning father of many nations, declaring that he would be the ancestor of kings and countless nations. God also promised to be the God of Abraham's descendants for all generations and to give them the land of Canaan as an everlasting possession. Sarai's name was changed to Sarah. And despite their advanced ages, God promised that she would bear a son, Isaac. As a sign of this eternal covenant, God introduced circumcision, a physical mark of dedication to him. Abraham's immediate obedience in circumcising himself, Ishmael, and every male in his household demonstrated his unwavering trust in God, even when the promise seemed humanly impossible. One day, 3 visitors arrived at Abraham's tent, bringing the astonishing news that Sarah would have a son within a year. Overhearing this, Sarah laughed, filled with disbelief. God asked, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" This rhetorical question challenges us to trust in God's power to fulfill his promises, no matter how unlikely they seem. As the visitors prepared to leave, they revealed God's plan to judge Sodom and Gomorrah for their wickedness. Abraham interceded, pleading for the cities to be spared if even 10 righteous people could be found. His boldness and compassion reflect a deep understanding of God's justice and mercy. Meanwhile, in Sodom, Lot welcomed 2 angels into his home, but the depravity of the city became evident as the men of Sodom sought to harm them. The angels struck the crowd with blindness and urged Lot to flee with his family. As fire and brimstone rained down, Lot's wife, looking back, was turned into a pillar of salt, a somber reminder of the cost of disobedience. Abraham continued his journey, moving to Gerar, where he once again introduced Sarah as his sister. King Abimelech, deceived, took her into his household. But God intervened in a dream, warning Abimelech of the truth. Abimelech returned Sarah and sought Abraham's prayers for healing, highlighting God's protection over his covenant people, even in their weaknesses. Finally, the long-awaited promise was fulfilled. Sarah gave birth to Isaac, whose name means laughter, reflecting the joy and wonder of his arrival. Yet, tension resurfaced as Sarah insisted that Hagar and Ishmael be sent away. Abraham, distressed, obeyed after God reassured him that Ishmael would also become a great nation. In the wilderness, God provided for Hagar and Ishmael, reaffirming his care for all peoples, even those outside the covenant line. The climax of Abraham's story came when God tested his faith by asking him to sacrifice Isaac. Obediently, Abraham journeyed to Mount Moriah with his son, trusting that God could provide even in death. As they climbed, Isaac asked, "Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham replied, "God himself will provide the lamb." At the last moment, an angel stopped Abraham, and God provided a ram as a substitute. This act foreshadowed Christ, the ultimate sacrifice for humanity's sin. Abraham named the place, "The Lord will provide," a testament to God's faithfulness. Sarah's death marked the end of an era, but Abraham's faith endured. He purchased the cave of Machpelah as a burial site, securing a foothold in the Promised Land. Even in mourning, Abraham acted in faith, trusting that God's promises would continue through Isaac. Abraham's journey is a powerful example of faith and obedience. From leaving Ur to building altars, facing famine, rescuing Lot, and trusting God with the sacrifice of his son, Abraham's life is a testament to unwavering faith. Each step he took was filled with trust in God's plan, even when the path was unclear or filled with challenges. Abram's story teaches us about trusting God's plan, even when it doesn't make sense. Just like Abram left everything behind to follow God, we are called to trust God and follow him, even when it requires stepping into the unknown. His faith in God's promises, despite the delays and obstacles, shows us that God's timing is perfect. Think about a time when you had to make a tough decision based on faith. Maybe you had to move to a new place, change jobs, or make a significant life change. Abraham's journey encourages us to hold on to our faith, knowing that God is always working behind the scenes, even when we can't see it. His willingness to intercede for Sodom and Gomorrah teaches us about compassion and standing up for what is right. Abraham's boldness in seeking mercy for others reflects a heart that cares deeply for people and understands God's mercy. This encourages us to be advocates for others, praying for mercy and justice in our communities. The covenant of circumcision marks a significant moment in Abraham's relationship with God. It signifies a tangible commitment to God, reminding us that our faith should be reflected in our actions. Abraham's immediate obedience, even when it involved physical sacrifice, highlights the importance of demonstrating our faith through what we do. When facing big decisions, Abraham's example of choosing to follow God's guidance over what seems easier or more beneficial teaches us to prioritize our relationship with God. It's about making choices that honor Him, even when they require sacrifice or go against the crowd. In our daily lives, Abraham's story teaches us about obedience and trust. Building the ark was a huge task that took years, much like the challenges we face today. Whether it's dealing with personal struggles, societal issues, or global crises, Abraham's unwavering faith inspires us to trust God's plan and remain faithful no matter how tough things get. The flood narrative also calls us to be good stewards of creation. Just as Noah cared for the animals in the ark, we are called to care for the world God has entrusted to us. This means taking responsibility for our environment, treating animals with kindness, and ensuring that we live in harmony with all living things. Beyond his faith, Abraham's story offers valuable lessons in leadership and stewardship. Abram was chosen to be the vessel for salvation, placing him in a position of great responsibility. His leadership was marked by humility, obedience, and unwavering faith, qualities essential for effective stewardship. Abram's ability to stay steadfast in his mission, despite external pressures and internal challenges, serves as a model for leadership grounded in faith and dedicated to fulfilling divine mandates. Abraham's story isn't just a standalone tale, it sets the stage for the rest of the Bible. His faith and the promises made to him continue to unfold through the stories of his descendants, Isaac, Jacob, and the 12 tribes of Israel. These promises also point forward to Jesus Christ, who fulfills the covenant by being the ultimate sacrifice and the true descendant of Abraham. Each chapter of Abraham's journey builds on the last, showing us how faith grows and deepens over time. From the initial call to leave Ur to the ultimate test of faith on Mount Moriah, Abraham's life is a journey of trust, obedience, and unwavering belief in God's promises. As we continue through Genesis, keep Abraham's story in mind. Let it inspire you to trust in God's plans, to act with faith and obedience, and to embrace the hope of renewal and restoration that God offers. Abraham's journey from a man in Ur to the father of a great nation is a powerful reminder of what it means to walk faithfully with God. Abraham's story is a powerful journey shaped by themes of faith, obedience, trust, and divine promise. It highlights the powerful impact of individual righteousness amidst widespread corruption, the meticulous care of a sovereign creator, and the enduring hope of restoration. From the call to leave everything behind to the promise of a son and the ultimate test of faith, Abraham's journey teaches us valuable lessons about trusting God, standing up for what's right, and living a life of faith. As we reflect on Abraham's journey, let's remember that our own faith journeys are part of a larger story. Just as Abraham trusted God's promises and walked faithfully, we too are called to trust, obey, and live out our faith in everyday life. Whether we're facing big challenges or everyday decisions, Abraham's example encourages us to rely on God's faithfulness and embrace the hope that comes from walking with Him. What would you do if asked to leave everything behind? Abram's story challenges us to trust God in the unknown. It invites us to step out in faith, just as Abraham did, and to believe that God is leading us towards a purpose greater than we can imagine. The rainbow remains a powerful symbol for us today. Every time we see one, it's a reminder of God's everlasting covenant and His promise to never again destroy the earth with a flood. It reassures us that God is working to renew and restore even when things seem bleak. Just as Abraham found refuge in his faith, we find our salvation and hope in Jesus Christ, who offers us eternal life and protection from the storms of life. In our daily lives, Noah's story teaches us about obedience and trust. Building the ark was a huge task that took years, much like the challenges we face today. Whether it's dealing with personal struggles, societal issues, or global crises, Noah's unwavering faith inspires us to trust God's plan and remain faithful, no matter how tough things get. The flood narrative also calls us to be good stewards of creation. Just as Noah cared for the animals in the ark, we are called to care for the world God has entrusted to us. This means taking responsibility for our environment, treating animals with kindness, and ensuring that we live in harmony with all living things. Ultimately, Abraham's story is a testament to God's justice and mercy. It shows us that while God does judge sin, He is also deeply committed to saving and restoring. This balance of justice and mercy is something we see throughout the Bible and something we can hold on to in our faith journey today. As we continue exploring Genesis and the rest of the Bible, keep Abraham's story in mind. Let it inspire you to live faithfully, trust in God's plans, and embrace the hope of renewal and restoration that He offers. Abraham's journey from a righteous man in a corrupted world to the father of a renewed creation is a powerful reminder of the transformative power of faith and obedience. It's a story that continues to speak to us, offering lessons and hope for our own lives as we walk faithfully with God. As we continue our journey through Genesis, we turn our focus to Isaac, the promised son of Abraham and Sarah. Isaac's life represents the continuation of God's covenant, a bridge between the faith of his father Abraham and the unfolding future of God's people. Yet Isaac's story is not without its own challenges and complexities. In chapter 24, Abraham is now advanced in years. Sensing that his time is drawing near, he becomes deeply concerned about Isaac's future, particularly his marriage. Abraham understands that for God's promise to continue, Isaac must find a wife who shares their faith and values. So he calls his most trusted servant, likely Eliezer, and gives him a solemn task. Abraham makes his servant swear an oath to find a wife for Isaac, not from the Canaanites among whom they live, but from Abraham's own relatives back in Mesopotamia. Imagine the weight of this responsibility. The servant sets out on a long journey, laden with gifts and guided by faith. As he reaches the city of Nahor, he stops by a well outside the town at evening time, the hour when women come out to draw water. Feeling the enormity of his mission, he prays earnestly, "Lord, God of my master Abraham, make me successful today and show kindness to my master Abraham." He devises a simple yet effective test. He will ask a young woman for a drink, and if she offers to water his camels as well, he will know she is the one God has chosen for Isaac. Before he finishes praying, Rebekah comes out with her jar on her shoulder. She is described as very beautiful, a virgin, and she is the granddaughter of Abraham's brother Nahor. The servant approaches her and asks for a sip of water. Rebekah not only gives him a drink, but eagerly offers to draw water for all his camels, a generous act considering the number of camels and the effort required. The servant watches in silence, amazed at how swiftly God has answered his prayer. Once the camels are watered, he presents Rebekah with gifts of jewelry and asks about her family. Learning that she is indeed from Abraham's own kin, he bows down and worships the Lord, praising him for his faithfulness. Rebekah runs to tell her family, and her brother Laban comes out to meet the servant. Hospitality is extended, and the servant recounts the entire story, his mission, his prayer, and how Rebekah fulfilled the sign he sought. Recognizing God's hand in these events, Rebekah's family agrees to the marriage. Rebekah herself is given a choice, and she willingly agrees to go with the servant to become Isaac's wife. As they approach Abraham's home, Isaac is out in the fields meditating. He looks up and sees camels approaching. Rebekah also looks up, and upon seeing Isaac, she asks the servant who he is. Learning that this is her future husband, she covers herself with a veil, a gesture of modesty and respect. The servant recounts to Isaac all that has happened. Isaac brings Rebekah into his mother Sarah's tent, and she becomes his wife. The scripture tells us that he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. It's a tender moment. A new chapter begins as love blossoms, and God's promise continues through their union. In chapter 25, we learn that Abraham lives to a ripe old age, and after remarrying and having more children, he eventually passes away. He is buried by his sons Isaac and Ishmael in the cave of Machpelah, where Sarah was also laid to rest. The mantle now fully passes to Isaac. Isaac and Rebekah face their own struggles. Like Sarah before her, Rebekah is barren. Isaac prays fervently to the Lord on behalf of his wife, and God answers his prayer. Rebekah conceives, but the pregnancy is difficult. The babies jostle within her, causing her great discomfort. In her distress, she seeks the Lord, asking, "Why is this happening to me?" God reveals to her that she is carrying twins, and not just any twins, but two nations. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. This prophecy sets the stage for the complex relationship between her sons and the unfolding of God's plan. When the time comes, Rebekah gives birth to twin boys. The first comes out red and hairy, so they name him Esau. The second comes out grasping Esau's heel, so he is named Jacob, which can mean he grasps the heel or he deceives. From the very beginning, their lives are intertwined in rivalry and destiny. As the boys grow, they develop distinct personalities and preferences. Esau becomes a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, a rugged outdoorsman. Jacob, on the other hand, is described as a quiet man, staying among the tents, perhaps more thoughtful or domesticated. This difference in their temperaments is mirrored in their parents' affections. Isaac favors Esau because he enjoys the wild game Esau brings home, while Rebekah favors Jacob. One day, Esau comes in from the fields famished and finds Jacob cooking a pot of lentil stew. Exhausted and hungry, Esau pleads with Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." Jacob sees an opportunity and responds, "First, sell me your birthright." The birthright in ancient times was a significant inheritance, a double portion allotted to the firstborn, along with leadership of the family. Esau, driven by immediate physical need, dismisses the value of his birthright. "Look, I'm about to die. What good is the birthright to me?" Jacob insists, and Esau swears an oath, selling his birthright for a bowl of stew and some bread. It's a moment that reveals much about both brothers, Esau's impulsiveness and disregard for long-term blessings, and Jacob's cunning and desire for what was not naturally his. In chapter 26, a famine strikes the land, echoing the challenges faced by Abraham. God appears to Isaac, instructing him not to go down to Egypt, but to stay in the land where God will bless him. God reaffirms the covenant made with Abraham, promising to bless Isaac, to give his descendants all these lands, and to make them as numerous as the stars in the sky. Isaac settles in Gerar, among the Philistines, where he faces a situation reminiscent of his father's past. Fearing for his safety because of Rebekah's beauty, he tells the men of the place that she is his sister. When Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, discovers the deception, seeing Isaac caressing Rebekah, he confronts Isaac. "What is this you have done to us?" he exclaims. Isaac explains his fear, and Abimelech orders that no one harm Isaac or Rebekah. Despite the rocky start, Isaac prospers greatly in Gerar. He plants crops and reaps 100-fold in the same year, blessed abundantly by the Lord. His wealth grows in flocks, herds, and servants, causing envy among the Philistines. They stop up the wells that Abraham's servants had dug, filling them with earth. Abimelech eventually asks Isaac to move away, saying, "You have become too powerful for us." Isaac moves to the valley of Gerar and reopens the wells dug in his father Abraham's time. His servants dig new wells, but conflicts arise with the local herdsmen over water rights. Each time, Isaac moves on, naming the wells according to the strife encountered: Esek, contention, and Sitnah, opposition. Finally, they dig a well and face no dispute, and Isaac names it Rehoboth, saying, "Now the Lord has given us room, and we will flourish in the land." God appears to Isaac that night, reaffirming his promise, "I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you." Isaac builds an altar there and calls on the name of the Lord. His faith, like his father's, is built on encounters with God, obedience and worship. Meanwhile, Esau takes 2 Hittite women as wives, which becomes a source of grief for Isaac and Rebekah. This sets the stage for further family tensions. In chapter 27, we witness one of the most dramatic and emotional stories in Genesis, the deception of Isaac by his own son Jacob, orchestrated by his wife Rebekah. Isaac is now old, and his eyes are weak. Believing his death is near, he calls Esau and asks him to hunt game and prepare a savory meal so that he may bless him before he dies. The blessing is more than words. It is a prophetic declaration of destiny and inheritance. Rebekah overhears this conversation and devises a plan to secure the blessing for her favored son, Jacob. She instructs Jacob to fetch 2 choice young goats so she can prepare the meal Isaac loves. Jacob is hesitant, aware that his father might recognize him and curse him instead of blessing him. But Rebekah assures him, "My son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say." They go to great lengths to disguise Jacob as Esau. Rebekah dresses him in Esau's best clothes and covers his hands and the smooth part of his neck with goat skins to mimic Esau's hairy skin. Jacob takes the prepared meal to his father. Isaac is suspicious. He asks, "Who is it?" Jacob replies, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me." Isaac questions how he found the game so quickly, and Jacob deceitfully credits the Lord's provision. Still doubtful, Isaac asks to feel Jacob's hands. Feeling the goat skins, he says, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." After further questioning and still uncertain, Isaac eats the meal and then offers the blessing to Jacob. The blessing he speaks over Jacob is profound as he prays, "May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed." Just as Jacob leaves his father's presence, Esau returns from hunting and prepares a meal for Isaac. When he enters, Isaac trembles violently upon realizing the deception. "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me?" he asks. Esau cries out with a bitter wail, "Bless me, me too, my father." But Isaac tells him that the blessing has been given and cannot be revoked. Esau's anguish turns to rage. He vows to kill Jacob once the period of mourning for their father is over. Rebekah learns of Esau's plans and warns Jacob to flee to her brother Laban in Haran until Esau's fury subsides. In chapter 28, Isaac calls Jacob and blesses him again, this time knowingly, sending him to Paddan Aram to find a wife from among his mother's relatives. He charges him not to marry a Canaanite woman and reaffirms the blessings of Abraham upon him. As Jacob sets out on his journey, he stops for the night at a certain place because the sun has set. Taking one of the stones there, he puts it under his head and lies down to sleep. That night, he has a vivid dream. He sees a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God ascending and descending on it. Above it stands the Lord, who says, "I am the Lord. the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go." When Jacob awakens, he is filled with awe. "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it," he says. He takes the stone he had placed under his head, sets it up as a pillar, and pours oil on top of it, naming the place Bethel, which means house of God. Jacob makes a vow, saying, "If God will be with me and will watch over me, then the Lord will be my God." This encounter marks a turning point in Jacob's life. Though he is fleeing from his brother's wrath and has acted deceitfully, God meets him in his vulnerability. The dream symbolizes a connection between heaven and earth, a reassurance that God is present and his promises endure despite human failings. As we reflect on these chapters, we see a complex web of family dynamics: love and favoritism, deception and rivalry, blessing and loss. The stories of Isaac, Rebekah, Esau, and Jacob reveal the deep humanity of these patriarchs and matriarchs. They are not flawless heroes, but real people with strengths and weaknesses, navigating their faith journeys amidst personal struggles. Through it all, God's sovereign plan moves forward. His purposes are not thwarted by human deceit or dysfunction. Instead, he works through imperfect people to fulfill his promises. The themes of birthright and blessing highlight the importance of God's covenant and the value of spiritual inheritance over immediate gratification. As we prepare to follow Jacob into the next chapters of his journey, we are reminded that God's grace often meets us in unexpected places. Like Jacob, we may find ourselves on the run, facing the consequences of our actions. Yet God does not abandon us. He reaches out, offering promises and presents, inviting us to trust him with our future. Let's dive into one of the most fascinating stories in the Bible, the journey of Jacob. Imagine yourself in ancient times, traveling through rugged landscapes under the scorching sun. Jacob is on a long journey, moving away from his family and familiar surroundings to find his uncle Laban, his mother's brother, who lives in a place called Haran. Jacob's journey is filled with hope, challenges, and divine encounters that shape his character and destiny. When Jacob arrives in Haran, he's greeted warmly by Laban's family. Haran is a lively place, bustling with activity. There are busy markets where traders sell goods, children play in the streets, and shepherds tend to their flocks in the fields. Jacob meets Rachel, Laban's beautiful and strong daughter, who is coming to water her father's sheep. There's an immediate connection between Jacob and Rachel, something deeper that hints at the great plans God has for both of them. Jacob works hard for Laban, tending to his flocks day and night. Over time, he falls in love with Rachel and agrees to work 7 years to marry her. These 7 years feel like just a few months to Jacob because of his love for Rachel. However, on the wedding night, Laban deceives Jacob by giving him Rachel's older sister Leah instead. Jacob is heartbroken, but agrees to work another 7 years to marry Rachel as well. This twist sets the stage for the complicated family dynamics that follow. Imagine the disappointment Jacob must have felt, investing 7 years of his life only to find himself married to Leah instead of Rachel. It's like planning for a wonderful event and having everything turn out differently than expected. Yet, Jacob's love for Rachel remains strong, and he continues to serve Laban with unwavering dedication, driven by his desire to be with her. Jacob's life in Haran becomes increasingly complicated with the presence of 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, and their maidservants, Bilhah and Zilpah. Leah, feeling unloved, yearns for Jacob's affection, while Rachel, though loved, struggles with barrenness. This situation leads to a complex family dynamic filled with love, rivalry, and longing. God sees Leah's sorrow and blesses her with children. She gives birth to 4 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Each name carries a story, reflecting Leah's hope for Jacob's love and her desire to be seen and cherished. Reuben, her firstborn, means "behold a son." Simeon means "heard." Levi means "joined." And Judah means "praise." These names highlight Leah's journey from feeling overlooked to experiencing the joy of motherhood and the blessing of children. Rachel, still yearning for a child, gives her maidservant Bilhah to Jacob, and Bilhah bears 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali. Leah, not wanting to feel left out, also gives her maidservant Zilpah to Jacob, who then bears Gad and Asher. Leah continues to bear more children, Issachar and Zebulun, and even a daughter, Dinah. Each child's name tells a part of the family's story, capturing moments of joy, struggle, and God's faithfulness. Years pass, and finally God answers Rachel's prayers. She gives birth to Joseph, a son who quickly becomes Jacob's favorite. This favoritism sets the stage for future tensions and conflicts among the brothers, illustrating the complexities of family relationships and favoritism. Joseph's special status brings both blessings and challenges, shaping the dynamics within the family and foreshadowing significant events to come. After many years in Haran, Jacob decides it's time to return to his homeland. He approaches Laban and asks for permission to leave with his family. Laban, seeing how much God has blessed him through Jacob, tries to keep him by offering better wages. They agree that Jacob will take all the speckled, spotted, and dark-colored sheep as his payment. Through hard work and God's blessing, Jacob's flocks grow abundantly, making him very wealthy. However, Laban's sons grow jealous of Jacob's success, and Laban's attitude toward him changes. Sensing the growing tension, God tells Jacob it's time to return to the land of his fathers. Jacob gathers his wives and children, explaining the situation and the challenges he has faced under Laban's rule. Together, they decide to leave secretly while Laban is away shearing his sheep. This decision marks a turning point in Jacob's life. It's a moment filled with uncertainty and hope, much like the times we face big decisions today. Jacob's willingness to trust God and follow his guidance, even when it means leaving behind a place where he has built a life, teaches us about the importance of obedience and faith in God's plans. 3 days after their departure, Laban discovers that Jacob and his family have left. He pursues them, catching up in the hill country of Gilead. In a tense and emotional encounter, Laban confronts Jacob, accusing him of stealing his household gods, idols that Rachel had secretly taken. Jacob, unaware of Rachel's actions, denies the accusation, and an intense search ensues. Rachel cleverly hides the idols, and Laban finds nothing. Despite the confrontation, they eventually make peace. Jacob and Laban set up a heap of stones as a witness between them, and Laban declares, "May the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other." They part ways, and Jacob continues his journey home, moving ever closer to the land and the brother he left behind years ago. This moment of reconciliation is powerful. It shows that even after years of conflict and deceit, relationships can be mended through honesty and mutual respect. Jacob's willingness to resolve the conflict peacefully highlights the importance of seeking harmony and understanding, even in difficult situations. As Jacob approaches Canaan, he's filled with fear and anxiety about meeting his brother Esau. Years earlier, Jacob had deceived Esau out of his birthright and blessing, causing a deep rift between them. Now, unsure of Esau's intentions, Jacob is terrified of a possible revenge. He sends messengers ahead with gifts, hoping to appease his brother and smooth over their troubled past. When the messengers return with news that Esau is coming to meet him with 400 men, Jacob's fear intensifies. In his desperation, he prays fervently, reminding God of his promises and seeking protection. This moment is a powerful reminder of the importance of seeking God's guidance and trusting in his protection during times of fear and uncertainty. That night, alone by the river Jabbok, Jacob has a shocking encounter that will forever change him. A mysterious man, often interpreted as an angel, approaches him, and they wrestle until daybreak. This struggle is more than physical. It symbolizes Jacob's lifelong wrestle for identity, blessing, and purpose. As dawn breaks, the man touches Jacob's hip, dislocating it, but Jacob refuses to let go, declaring, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asks for Jacob's name and then gives him a new one, Israel, meaning he struggles with God. This name signifies a turning point, a transformation from a man who once relied on deception to a man who now relies on God. The man blesses Jacob, and as the sun rises, Jacob limps away, forever marked by this encounter. He names the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." This powerful moment highlights the importance of perseverance and unwavering faith in seeking God's blessing, even when the path is challenging. This encounter with God serves as a pivotal moment in Jacob's life. It's a turning point that marks his transformation from a man driven by his own desires to one who seeks and trusts in God's will. Jacob's determination to receive a blessing, even at the cost of physical pain, demonstrates his deep desire to be aligned with God's purpose for his life. In chapter 33, Jacob looks up and sees Esau approaching with his men. Filled with trepidation, Jacob arranges his family and bows down 7 times as he approaches his brother. But instead of anger, Esau embraces him, weeping. It's a moment of grace and reconciliation, a scene that defies Jacob's fears and shows the power of forgiveness. The two brothers, once at odds, are now united, embracing each other after years of separation. Jacob offers Esau gifts, which Esau initially declines but eventually accepts. They part ways in peace, and Jacob continues on to settle in Shechem, where he buys a plot of land and builds an altar, calling it El Elohe Israel, meaning God, the God of Israel. This altar symbolizes Jacob's new identity, his acknowledgement of God's faithfulness throughout his journey. This reconciliation is deeply moving. It shows that even after years of conflict and deceit, relationships can be healed through genuine forgiveness and the grace of God. Jacob's relief and joy at meeting Esau safely reflect the restoration that comes from trusting in God's provision and mercy. But Jacob's family faces dark trials in chapter 34. His daughter Dinah is violated by Shechem, the son of Hamor, the local ruler. Shechem, driven by desire, wishes to marry Dinah, but Jacob's sons, angered by their sister's mistreatment, deceive Hamor and Shechem. They agree to the marriage only if all the men of the city are circumcised. On the 3rd day, while the men are still in pain, Simeon and Levi attack the city, killing all the males in a brutal act of vengeance. Jacob is horrified by his sons' actions, fearing that their violence will bring retribution from surrounding tribes. This event leaves a dark mark on the family, highlighting the complexities of justice, revenge, and the consequences of unchecked anger. It serves as a sobering reminder that even within a family chosen by God, human emotions and actions can lead to significant turmoil and pain. This tragic event underscores the importance of handling conflicts with wisdom and restraint. It also highlights the unintended consequences that can arise from trying to solve problems through our own means, rather than seeking God's guidance. In chapter 35, God calls Jacob to return to Bethel, the place where he encountered God in his dream years earlier. As they prepare to journey there, Jacob instructs his household to rid themselves of foreign gods, purifying themselves in a symbolic act of renewal. They arrive at Bethel, and Jacob builds an altar, naming the place El Bethel, God of Bethel. Here, God reaffirms the covenant with Jacob, reiterating the promise of descendants, land, and blessing. This return to Bethel marks a spiritual renewal for Jacob, a reconnection to the God who has guided him through every trial. It's a moment of deep faith and gratitude, a time to acknowledge God's hand in every step of his journey. But sorrow also touches Jacob's life. His beloved wife Rachel dies during childbirth, giving birth to their second son Benjamin. She is buried on the way to Ephrath, and Jacob sets up a pillar at her grave, mourning the loss of the woman he loved so deeply. Jacob, now known as Israel, returns to his father Isaac at Mamre. Shortly after, Isaac dies, and Esau and Jacob come together once more to bury their father. It's a moment of closure, a full circle that brings the family line back to the promises given to Abraham. This reunion underscores the themes of forgiveness and restoration that have been woven throughout Jacob's journey. In chapter 36, we shift our focus to Esau's descendants, a line that becomes the nation of Edom. This chapter serves as a reminder of the branching paths that come from Abraham's descendants, each carrying their own destiny. It highlights how God's plan extends beyond one family, touching entire nations and shaping history in ways that resonate through the generations. While Jacob's story is central, understanding Esau's lineage adds depth to the narrative, showing that God's blessings and plans have far-reaching impacts, influencing not just immediate families, but entire peoples and nations. Jacob's journey is one of transformation, from a man driven by deceit to a man deeply marked by encounters with God. Through every trial, his struggles with Laban, his fear of Esau, his wrestling with God, and his family's complex dynamics, Jacob becomes Israel, a man who understands that true blessing comes not from striving, but from surrender. Each challenge he faces and overcomes strengthens his faith and deepens his relationship with God, illustrating the transformative power of divine encounters and unwavering trust. As we close this chapter on Jacob, we see that God's promises endure, even through human failings. Jacob's story is one of redemption, reminding us that God can transform our lives, no matter our past. The legacy of Jacob's 12 sons will shape the story of Israel, and as we continue through Genesis, we are drawn deeper into the unfolding plan of God's redemption. Jacob's journey teaches us important lessons about faith, obedience, and trust. His life shows that God can turn our struggles into strengths. Jacob faced fears, made peace with his brother Esau, and sought God's blessing even in tough times. These actions encourage us to trust God's plan, no matter how uncertain or difficult our situations may seem. Think about the challenges you face today: personal struggles, family conflicts, or worries about the future. Jacob's story reminds us that we are not alone. Just as Jacob trusted God's promises and saw his faithfulness, we can believe that God is guiding us, even when the path ahead is unclear. In our daily lives, Jacob's experiences of love, rivalry, deception, and transformation mirror our own relationships and personal growth. We can find inspiration in his resilience and strong faith. When we face conflicts or misunderstandings, Jacob's reconciliation with Esau shows us the power of forgiveness and the importance of seeking peace. His brave actions to rescue Lot remind us that standing up for our loved ones and trusting in God's protection are key parts of living faithfully. Jacob's change from a man who used deceit to one who wrestled with God highlights the importance of personal growth and the willingness to change. It encourages us to face our own flaws and seek God's help in becoming better people. Jacob's story sets the stage for the rest of the Bible. His faith and the promises made to him continue through his descendants, Isaac, his sons, and the 12 tribes of Israel. These promises also point to Jesus Christ, who fulfills the covenant by being the ultimate sacrifice and the true descendant of Abraham. Each part of Jacob's journey builds on the last, showing how faith grows and deepens over time. From leaving Haran to the test of faith on Mount Moriah, Jacob's life is a journey of trust and obedience to God's promises. As we continue through Genesis, let Jacob's story inspire us to trust in God's plans, act with faith and obedience, and embrace the hope of renewal and restoration that God offers. Jacob's journey from a man in Haran to the father of a great nation reminds us what it means to walk faithfully with God. Jacob's story is filled with themes of faith, obedience, trust, and God's promises. It shows how one person's righteousness can make a big difference, even in a world filled with challenges. From leaving everything behind to the promise of a son and the ultimate test of faith, Jacob's journey teaches us to trust God, stand up for what's right, and live a life of faith. As we think about Jacob's journey, let's remember that our own faith journeys are part of a bigger story. Just as Jacob trusted God's promises and walked faithfully, we are called to trust, obey, and live out our faith every day. Whether we're facing big challenges or making everyday decisions, Jacob's example encourages us to rely on God's faithfulness and embrace the hope that comes from walking with Him. What would you do if you were asked to leave everything behind? Jacob's story challenges us to trust God in the unknown. It invites us to step out in faith, just as Jacob did, and believe that God is leading us toward a greater purpose. The rainbow remains a powerful symbol for us today. Every time we see one, it reminds us of God's everlasting promise to never destroy the earth with a flood again. It reassures us that God is working to renew and restore, even when things seem bleak. Just as Jacob found strength in his faith, we find our salvation and hope in Jesus Christ, who offers us eternal life and protection from life's storms. In our daily lives, Jacob's story teaches us about obedience and trust. Just like building the ark was a huge task that took years, we face big challenges that require patience and faith. Whether we're dealing with personal struggles, societal issues, or global crises, Jacob's unwavering faith inspires us to trust God's plan and stay faithful, no matter how tough things get. Ultimately, Jacob's story is a testament to God's justice and mercy. It shows us that while God does judge sin, He is also deeply committed to saving and restoring. This balance of justice and mercy is something we see throughout the Bible and something we can hold on to in our faith journey today. As we continue exploring Genesis and the rest of the Bible, keep Jacob's story in mind. Let it inspire you to live faithfully, trust in God's plans, and embrace the hope of renewal and restoration that He offers. Jacob's journey from a righteous man in a troubled world to the father of a renewed creation is a powerful reminder of the transformative power of faith and obedience. It's a story that continues to speak to us, offering lessons and hope for our own lives as we walk faithfully with God. In chapter 37, the spotlight shifts to Joseph, the beloved son of Jacob. Joseph is 17 years old, full of dreams and hope, the son of Jacob's old age, born to him by Rachel, his cherished wife. Jacob's love for Joseph is evident, and he doesn't try to hide it. He even makes Joseph a richly ornamented robe, a symbol of his special favor. This robe, often described as a coat of many colors, becomes a tangible reminder to Joseph's brothers of their father's preference for him, and it stirs deep jealousy within them. Joseph, innocent and perhaps a bit naive, doesn't seem to realize the extent of his brothers' resentment. One day, he shares a dream with them, a dream that would further ignite their anger. In his dream, he and his brothers were binding sheaves of grain in the field, when suddenly his sheaf rose and stood upright, while his brothers' sheaves gathered around and bowed down to his. The implication of this dream is clear. Joseph will one day rise above his brothers, a notion that enrages them. Their jealousy sharpens as they say to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" But Joseph doesn't stop there. He has another dream, and once again he shares it with his brothers, and this time with his father too. In this dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to him. Even Jacob, who dearly loves Joseph, finds this hard to accept. "Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" he asks. Jacob rebukes Joseph. Yet in his heart, he keeps the matter in mind, pondering what these dreams might mean. One day, Jacob sends Joseph to check on his brothers, who are grazing their flocks near Shechem. As Joseph approaches them, they see him from a distance, and a dark plan begins to form. "Here comes that dreamer," they say, mocking him. The sight of Joseph in his distinctive robe, a reminder of Jacob's favoritism, stirs up their envy and anger. They plot to kill him, saying, "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." But Reuben, the eldest brother, steps in, suggesting that they throw Joseph into a cistern instead of killing him, hoping he can rescue Joseph later. When Joseph arrives, they strip him of his coat, the symbol of his father's love, and throw him into an empty cistern. The brothers sit down to eat, their hearts hardened against their own flesh and blood. As they eat, they see a caravan of Ishmaelite traders passing by on their way to Egypt. Judah, another brother, suggests they sell Joseph to the traders instead of leaving him to die. "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood?" he reasons. The brothers agree, and for 20 pieces of silver they sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites. Joseph's cries are ignored, his pleas unheard, as he is led away into a foreign land. Reuben, who wasn't with them during the sale, returns to find the cistern empty. Grief-stricken, he tears his clothes, realizing what his brothers have done. The brothers then take Joseph's coat, dip it in the blood of a goat, and bring it to their father. Jacob, upon seeing the bloodied coat, is devastated, believing a wild animal has killed his beloved son. He mourns deeply, refusing to be comforted. "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave," he says. Jacob's sorrow fills the household, while Joseph is taken to Egypt, sold to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. In chapter 38, the narrative shifts briefly to Judah, one of Joseph's brothers, offering insight into his own life and moral choices. Judah leaves his family, marries a Canaanite woman, and has 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. When grows up, Judah arranges a marriage for him with a woman named Tamar. But is wicked in the Lord's sight, and he dies, leaving Tamar without children. In accordance with custom, Judah tells his second son Onan to fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law by marrying Tamar and providing her with offspring. But Onan, knowing that the child would not be his, deliberately prevents Tamar from conceiving, which displeases God. As a result, Onan also dies, leaving Tamar twice widowed and without a child. Judah, fearing that his youngest son Shelah might also die, instructs Tamar to live as a widow in her father's house, promising her that she can marry Shelah when he comes of age. But time passes, and Judah does not fulfill his promise. Tamar, feeling betrayed, devises a plan. Disguising herself as a prostitute, she waits by the roadside where she knows Judah will pass. Judah, not recognizing her, solicits her, and as payment she asks for his seal, cord, and staff as a pledge. Later, when it becomes known that Tamar is pregnant, Judah, unaware of the child's true father, orders her to be brought out and burned. But Tamar presents the seal, cord, and staff, revealing Judah as the father. Confronted with his hypocrisy, Judah acknowledges his fault, saying, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah." Tamar gives birth to twins, Perez and Zerah, and through Perez, the lineage of Judah continues, a line that will one day lead to King David and ultimately to Jesus Christ. In chapter 39, we return to Joseph, now a servant in the house of Potiphar. Though he has been sold into slavery, God's favor is with him. Joseph is diligent, responsible, and trustworthy, and Potiphar notices. He places Joseph in charge of his household, entrusting him with everything he owns. Under Joseph's management, Potiphar's household flourishes and everything prospers. But Joseph's trials are far from over. Potiphar's wife takes notice of him, captivated by his appearance and character. Day after day, she tries to seduce him, but Joseph resists, firmly refusing her advances. He tells her, "My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" His integrity is unshakable, rooted in his devotion to God and loyalty to his master. One day, Potiphar's wife catches Joseph by his cloak, insisting that he lie with her. Joseph flees, leaving his cloak in her hands, but this only fuels her resentment. Scorned, she accuses Joseph of attempting to assault her, presenting his cloak as evidence. Potiphar, enraged by the accusation, has Joseph thrown into prison. Joseph's life, once full of promise, has taken another dark turn. He is now a prisoner, falsely accused, yet God is still with him. In chapter 40, even in prison, Joseph's character shines. The warden quickly sees Joseph's capabilities and places him in charge of the other prisoners. God's favor follows Joseph, and soon he becomes responsible for all that goes on in the prison, trusted and respected. Among the prisoners are two of Pharaoh's officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. Both men have dreams one night, vivid and troubling, yet they cannot understand their meaning. Observing their distress, Joseph asks them to share their dreams, acknowledging that interpretations belong to God. The chief cupbearer goes first, describing a dream in which he saw a vine with 3 branches. As he watched, the branches budded, blossomed, and produced grapes, which he pressed into Pharaoh's cup and placed in Pharaoh's hand. Joseph, hearing the dream, interprets it as a sign that in 3 days, Pharaoh will restore the cupbearer to his position. Joseph then makes a heartfelt request, "But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison." Encouraged, the chief baker shares his dream, hoping for a favorable interpretation. In his dream, he had 3 baskets of bread on his head, and birds were eating from the top basket. Joseph's interpretation, however, is grim. He tells the baker that in 3 days, Pharaoh will execute him. As Joseph predicted, both dreams come true. The cupbearer is restored, and the baker is executed. Yet, despite his plea, the cupbearer forgets Joseph, and he remains in prison, waiting, wondering when God's promises will come to pass. Joseph's journey so far has been marked by betrayal, suffering, and moments of hope overshadowed by disappointment. Yet, through every trial, God's hand is upon him, shaping him for a purpose he cannot yet see. Joseph's resilience in the face of hardship, his integrity in Potiphar's house, and his compassion in prison all reveal a heart that remains faithful, even when the world seems against him. As we move into the next chapters, we will see the fulfillment of God's promises in ways that Joseph could never imagine. His story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, God is at work, and sometimes the greatest blessings come through the most difficult trials. In chapter 41, 2 years have passed since the cupbearer was restored to his position, yet Joseph remains in prison, seemingly forgotten. But one night, Pharaoh himself has a pair of disturbing dreams that no one in his court can interpret. In the first dream, he sees 7 sleek, healthy cows coming up out of the Nile, only to be devoured by 7 gaunt, ugly cows that follow them. In the second dream, he sees 7 plump heads of grain growing on a single stalk. Then 7 thin and scorched heads of grain swallow them up. Troubled and desperate for answers, Pharaoh summons all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, but no one can explain the dreams. At this moment, the chief cupbearer remembers Joseph and tells Pharaoh of the young Hebrew prisoner who interpreted his and the baker's dreams with perfect accuracy. Pharaoh, grasping at hope, sends for Joseph, and Joseph is hurriedly brought from the prison, given fresh clothes, and prepared to stand before Egypt's ruler. Pharaoh tells Joseph, "I have had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." Joseph, humble and clear, replies, "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." With this simple statement, Joseph shifts the focus from himself to God, acknowledging that his abilities are not his own, but a gift from the Almighty. Pharaoh recounts his dreams, and Joseph listens intently. Then, with a calm certainty, Joseph explains that the dreams are one and the same, revealing God's plan. The 7 good cows and the 7 good heads of grain represent 7 years of great abundance, Joseph says. But the 7 thin cows and the 7 scorched heads of grain represent 7 years of famine that will follow. The famine will be so severe that it will consume the land, and the abundance will be forgotten. Joseph, understanding the gravity of the situation, goes a step further. He advises Pharaoh to appoint a wise and discerning man to oversee the land during the years of plenty, storing up grain in preparation for the years of famine. Impressed by Joseph's wisdom and moved by his confidence, Pharaoh declares, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." In a single day, Joseph's life is transformed. He is given the signet ring from Pharaoh's hand, dressed in fine linen robes, and a gold chain is placed around his neck. He rides in Pharaoh's chariot as officials shout before him, "Make way!" Egypt, a land once foreign and hostile, now embraces Joseph as its ruler, second only to Pharaoh. Joseph begins his work with diligence, gathering grain during the 7 abundant years, storing it in great quantities in the cities across Egypt. His insight and leadership turn Egypt into a storehouse, a refuge prepared for the coming storm. In the midst of these responsibilities, Joseph's personal life also finds fulfillment. Pharaoh gives him a new name, Zaphenath-Paneah, and he marries Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, a priest of On. Together they have 2 sons. Joseph names his firstborn Manasseh, saying, "It is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." His second son is named Ephraim, meaning God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. These names, like markers in Joseph's journey, reflect his healing and gratitude, a life transformed by grace. As the years of famine arrive, the severity of the scarcity becomes apparent. The land withers, crops fail, and hunger spreads across Egypt and beyond. People from all surrounding countries come to Egypt, desperate to buy grain. Among those affected by the famine are Joseph's own family, still in Canaan, who face starvation. In chapter 42, Jacob learns that there is grain in Egypt and sends his 10 sons to buy food, keeping Benjamin, his youngest son, at home. The brothers, unaware of Joseph's identity or position, arrive in Egypt and bow down before him, fulfilling the dreams he had as a youth. But Joseph recognizes them immediately, though they do not recognize him. The memories of betrayal flood back, yet Joseph restrains his emotions, choosing to speak harshly, testing them. "Where do you come from?" he demands. The brothers, fearful, explain their need for food. Joseph accuses them of being spies, probing their responses, assessing their sincerity. They protest, explaining that they are 12 brothers, the sons of one man, and that their youngest brother remains with their father. Joseph seizes upon this information, seeing a chance to test his brothers' loyalty. He places them in prison for 3 days, allowing them time to reflect on their actions. On the 3rd day, Joseph offers them a deal. He will release them to bring grain back to their starving family, but one brother must remain behind as a guarantee that they will return with their youngest brother. Simeon is chosen and bound before their eyes, and the others are sent back to Canaan with grain. Unknown to them, Joseph secretly orders that their silver, the money they paid for the grain, be returned to their sacks. As they journey home, the brothers discover the silver in their sacks and are filled with fear, wondering what God is doing to them. They return to Jacob and recount their encounter with the harsh Egyptian ruler, explaining that they must bring Benjamin back if they are to see Simeon again. But Jacob is distraught, saying, "You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin." Reuben, desperate to convince his father, offers his own sons as a pledge, but Jacob refuses. The family remains in limbo, struggling between hunger and the fear of losing another son. In chapter 43, the famine continues, pressing the family into desperation. With no other choice, Jacob reluctantly agrees to let Benjamin go, entrusting him to Judah's care. Judah, unlike before, takes full responsibility, promising his father that he will ensure Benjamin's safe return. The brothers set out for Egypt, this time with gifts and double the silver to pay for the grain they fear was left unpaid. When they arrive, Joseph sees Benjamin, his youngest brother, and his heart is overwhelmed, though he maintains his composure. He orders a feast to be prepared and invites them to dine at his home. The brothers are uneasy, fearing they are being accused of theft. But Joseph's steward reassures them, saying, "Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver." Relieved but puzzled, they enter Joseph's house, where they are treated with honor. When Joseph sees Benjamin, he is so moved that he has to leave the room to weep, overcome by emotion. After composing himself, he returns and serves the meal. To their astonishment, the brothers are seated in order of their birth, and Benjamin receives 5 times the portion of the others. They eat and drink freely, unaware of Joseph's plan. In chapter 44, Joseph devises a final test to see if his brothers have truly changed. He instructs his steward to fill their sacks with grain and to place his own silver cup in Benjamin's sack. As dawn breaks, the brothers set out for Canaan, unaware of the trap that has been laid. Shortly after they leave, Joseph sends his steward after them, accusing them of stealing the cup. The brothers, certain of their innocence, declare that if any of them is found with the cup, he will die, and the rest will become slaves. But when the steward searches the sacks, he finds the cup in Benjamin's, and the brothers are devastated. They tear their clothes in grief, returning to the city, united in their determination to stand by Benjamin. They throw themselves at Joseph's feet, pleading for mercy. Judah steps forward, speaking on behalf of his brothers. He recounts their father's love for Benjamin and the pain that would consume Jacob if Benjamin does not return. Judah offers himself as a substitute, saying, "Now then, please let your servant remain here as my lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers." This moment is transformative. Judah, once willing to sell Joseph, now offers his own life for Benjamin's. Through tears, he speaks words filled with humility, love, and repentance, a display of brotherly love that Joseph has longed to see. Joseph, overwhelmed, knows that the moment of truth and reconciliation has finally arrived. As we move into the next chapters, the stage is set for one of the most powerful reunions in the Bible. Joseph's heart is torn between justice and mercy, but his brother's genuine repentance offers a path toward healing. This journey, once filled with betrayal and bitterness, now leads toward forgiveness and restoration. In chapter 45, we reach a turning point in Joseph's story. Imagine yourself in the grand halls of Egypt, a place full of life and Pharaoh's big palace. Here Joseph, once a young man betrayed by his own brothers, stands before them in a moment that will change everything. Joseph's brothers have come to Egypt to get food during a terrible famine that has hit their home in Canaan. They kneel before Joseph, not knowing that the powerful man in front of them is their long-lost brother. The room is full of tension and unspoken feelings. Joseph, who has become second only to Pharaoh, can't hold back his emotions anymore. Tears start to flow, and he tells everyone to leave, wanting to be alone with his brothers. As the doors close, Joseph breaks down, crying loudly. His brothers are shocked and confused. Here stands Joseph, their brother, who they thought was dead after selling him into slavery years ago. The surprise is overwhelming, and their fear is clear. But Joseph's heart is filled with more than just sadness. It's filled with grace and understanding. Looking into their eyes, Joseph finally reveals who he is. "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" The brothers are stunned. These are the same brothers who betrayed him out of jealousy and fear. Now, years later, they face the man they wronged, who has become a powerful and respected leader. The room is filled with mixed emotions: fear, guilt, hope, and awe. Seeing their fear, Joseph steps forward gently. "Come closer," he says, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. He reassures them, saying, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now, do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." His words are full of kindness and understanding. Joseph knows that their actions, though wrong, were part of a bigger plan. Through their betrayal, he was able to rise to a position where he could save not just his family, but many others during the famine. It's a powerful reminder that God can turn our darkest moments into opportunities for His glory. Joseph explains that the famine is still ongoing and will last another 5 years. He asks his brothers to return to Canaan, bring their father Jacob, and settle in the region of Goshen, where he can take care of them. This request is not just about saving his family, it's about fulfilling God's promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Joseph's leadership and planning have turned personal tragedy into national salvation, showing how God works through our struggles for a greater purpose. As Joseph embraces Benjamin, the youngest brother, the emotional tension breaks. He cries openly, hugging each of his brothers, offering forgiveness and love despite their past actions. This act of reconciliation is deep and meaningful, healing years of separation and pain with love and understanding. It's a testament to the power of forgiveness and the transformative work of God in our lives. Pharaoh hears about this amazing reunion and is pleased, recognizing the importance of Joseph's leadership and the reconciliation within his family. Pharaoh tells Joseph to bring his entire household to Egypt, giving them wagons and supplies for the journey. With gifts and provisions, the brothers leave with hearts full of hope and gratitude, carrying news that will change their father's life forever. In Genesis chapter 46, the brothers arrive home and share the incredible news that Joseph is still alive and holds a high position in Egypt. Jacob, also known as Israel, is initially overwhelmed with disbelief. The thought that his beloved son, whom he had mourned as dead, is alive seems impossible. But when he sees the wagons and provisions sent by Joseph, his spirit lifts, and he exclaims, "I'm convinced. My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." Jacob gathers his entire family, including his wives, children, and grandchildren, and sets out for Egypt. This journey is filled with both excitement and a sense of closure. Before crossing into Egypt, Jacob stops at Beersheba, a significant place where God appeared to him years earlier. He offers sacrifices to God, seeking guidance and reassurance for the journey ahead. This act of worship shows Jacob's deep faith and reliance on God's promises. That night, God speaks to Jacob in a vision, comforting him and reminding him of the promises made to his forefathers. "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again." These words bring immense peace to Jacob, confirming that God is with him every step of the way. With this assurance, Jacob continues his journey, confident in God's plan and presence. As Jacob and his family near Egypt, Joseph prepares his chariot to meet his father. The moment they embrace is filled with overwhelming joy and relief. After years of separation, loss, and sorrow, father and son are finally reunited. Joseph holds Jacob close, tears of joy streaming down his face, while Jacob, now content and at peace, whispers, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." This embrace symbolizes the healing of old wounds and the restoration of their relationship, showcasing the power of God's grace and redemption. Joseph introduces his family to Pharaoh, who warmly welcomes them and grants them the fertile land of Goshen. This land is perfect for their flocks and families, providing a safe place for them to thrive, even as the famine continues. Pharaoh's favor ensures that Jacob's family is well taken care of, and their presence in Egypt signifies the fulfillment of God's promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In Genesis chapter 47, Joseph continues to manage Egypt's resources wisely, coming up with a plan that helps the people survive during the years of famine. He advises Pharaoh to store grain during the 7 years of plenty to prepare for the 7 years of famine. As the famine gets worse, the Egyptians begin to trade their livestock and land for food, eventually becoming Pharaoh's tenants. This plan not only saves Egypt, but also secures Joseph's family's future, showing his role as a wise and divinely guided leader. Joseph's leadership is a great example of how God equips us to manage the resources and responsibilities he gives us. His smart planning and wise management ensure that both Egypt and his family survive the tough years. It's a reminder that God blesses us with the ability to lead and provide, using our talents and wisdom to serve others and honor him. Meanwhile, Jacob's life is coming to an end. He has lived 17 years in Egypt, watching his family grow and prosper. However, Jacob knows that Egypt is not their final home, and he longs to be buried with his ancestors in Canaan. In Genesis chapter 48, Jacob asks Joseph to promise that he will not bury him in Egypt. Jacob wants to be buried in the cave of Machpelah, the family burial site, showing his connection to the land of his fathers and his strong faith in God's promises. As Jacob's health gets worse, Joseph brings his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, to visit him. Jacob, though weak, sits up to bless his grandsons. He remembers God's promises to him and his forefathers, talking about the covenant that ties them to the land of Canaan. In a special moment, Jacob crosses his arms, placing his right hand on Ephraim, the younger, and his left on Manasseh, the older. Joseph tries to correct his father, thinking he made a mistake by blessing the younger son first, but Jacob refuses. He explains, "I know, my son, I know. He too will become a people, and he too will be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a group of nations." This blessing not only sets the future for Ephraim and Manasseh, but also hints at the growth and importance of their descendants in the history of Israel. Jacob's blessings are full of hope and promise. He calls on the God of his fathers, asking that his presence be with Manasseh and Ephraim, and that they grow into a large number in the land. These blessings are not just personal, they are the foundation for the future nation of Israel, connecting the past to the present and making sure that God's promises continue through generations. Let's take a moment to understand the emotions and reasons behind these events. Imagine Joseph standing before his brothers after all those years. The pain of betrayal is still fresh, yet here he is, a man changed by his experiences and his strong faith in God. His tears aren't just of joy, they're a release of years of sadness and anger. His choice to forgive is a powerful act of grace, showing how deep his relationship with God has become and how he understands God's bigger plan. For his brothers, the meeting is a mix of fear, guilt, and hope. They sold Joseph out of jealousy, thinking they had gotten rid of a difficult brother. Now, seeing Joseph alive and in a position of power forces them to face their past actions. Their fear is obvious, but Joseph's kind words begin to heal old wounds. It's a strong reminder that no matter how deep our hurts or mistakes, God's grace can bring healing and restoration. Jacob's initial disbelief at the news of Joseph's survival adds another layer of emotion. He had mourned Joseph's loss for so long, and seeing his son alive feels almost unreal. But when he sees the wagons and supplies sent by Joseph, his faith is restored. This moment shows the importance of hope and the power of God's faithfulness. Jacob's decision to trust God's promise and go to Egypt is a testament to his enduring faith, despite years of uncertainty and hardship. The reunion in Egypt is not just a personal family moment, it's a crucial event that affects the entire history of the Israelites. Jacob's journey, now based on faith and trust, is about more than just his personal growth. It's about laying the groundwork for a nation. His actions, from building altars to blessing his grandsons, are full of meaning, connecting his story to the bigger story of God's plan to save his people. Joseph's rise to power and his ability to save his family set the stage for the eventual Exodus, where the Israelites will leave Egypt and return to the Promised Land. Jacob's blessings and the establishment of his grandsons as leaders hint at the 12 tribes of Israel, each playing a crucial role in the nation's growth. These chapters highlight the themes of God's provision, faithfulness, and transformation. God's hand is evident in every step of Joseph and Jacob's journeys, guiding them through tough times and big successes. Their stories remind us that God's plans are always at work, even when we can't see them or when they seem different from what we expected. As we think about Joseph's reunion and Jacob's transformation, let's consider how these stories speak to our own lives. What challenges are we facing that need us to trust in God's plan? How can we show Joseph's forgiveness and Jacob's strong faith in our relationships and responsibilities? Joseph's journey from a betrayed brother to a savior of nations teaches us that God can turn our darkest moments into opportunities for his glory. His story encourages us to stay faithful, even when things seem tough, trusting that God is working behind the scenes for our good and his purposes. Jacob's story of change reminds us that our encounters with God can deeply change us. From a man who used to deceive to a man of faith, Jacob's journey shows the power of God's grace and the potential for personal growth and redemption. His blessings on his grandsons and his legacy of faith ensure that God's promises continue through future generations. What would you do if you found yourself in Joseph's shoes, facing the brothers who wronged you, or if you were Jacob, dealing with your past and seeking God's blessing for your future? These stories challenge us to face our fears, embrace forgiveness, and trust in God's bigger plan for our lives. The covenant between God and Jacob, reaffirmed through Joseph, reminds us of God's never-ending faithfulness. Every time we see a rainbow, it symbolizes this everlasting promise, a promise that God will never leave us or abandon us, and that he is always working to fulfill his purposes in our lives. In our daily lives, Joseph's and Jacob's stories teach us about obedience, trust, and the importance of relying on God's guidance. Whether we're dealing with personal struggles, family conflicts, or big life changes, these stories encourage us to trust in God's plan, seek reconciliation, and use our resources wisely. They remind us that our faith journeys are part of a larger story, one that is woven with God's promises, his grace, and his unwavering love. In chapter 49, Jacob gathers his 12 sons around him, knowing his time is near. These final moments are filled with gravity as Jacob prepares to offer blessings and words that will shape the future of each tribe. His sons stand before him, and he begins with Reuben, his firstborn. Reuben, who was once strong and promising, lost his father's favor by defiling Jacob's bed. In a voice filled with sorrow but clarity, Jacob says, "Unstable as water, you will no longer excel." Next, he turns to Simeon and Levi, who had acted with fierce and violent anger in avenging their sister Dinah. Jacob acknowledges their passion, but warns of the consequences of unchecked wrath. He declares that they will be scattered in Israel, a prophecy that later unfolds as the tribe of Levi is set apart as priests, without a land inheritance, and Simeon's inheritance is absorbed into Judah's. When Jacob reaches Judah, his tone changes. Judah is not perfect, but his future holds a promise far beyond himself. "Judah, Your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. Jacob speaks of a ruler rising from Judah's line, a kingly lineage that will one day bring forth David and ultimately the Messiah. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his. This blessing, filled with prophetic significance, foreshadows the coming of a Savior, a king who will reign over all. Jacob continues, blessing each son in turn. Zebulun will live by the seashore, dwelling near the coast. Issachar will be like a strong donkey, bearing the burdens of labor. Dan will provide justice for his people, though he will also be a serpent by the roadside. Gad will be attacked, but will overcome in the end. Asher's land will yield rich food, and Naphtali is described as a free and swift doe. To each son, Jacob speaks unique words, reflecting their character and destinies. When Jacob reaches Joseph, his voice softens. Joseph, the son of his old age, has endured much suffering, yet remains steadfast. Jacob's blessing over Joseph is lavish, brimming with love and admiration. He describes him as a fruitful vine, a branch that climbs over a wall. Despite the hardships Joseph faced, God has been his shepherd, his rock, and his strength. May the Almighty bless you with blessings of the heavens above, blessings of the deep that lies below, blessings of the breast and womb. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the age-old hills. Finally, Jacob blesses Benjamin, the youngest of his sons, likening him to a ravenous wolf, capturing the fierceness that will characterize the tribe of Benjamin in Israel's future battles. With these words, Jacob finishes his blessings, closing this chapter of his life with the prophetic hope of a nation that will rise from these 12 sons. Having blessed each son, Jacob draws his final breath, his life having spanned 147 years. His legacy is one of struggle and redemption, a journey marked by encounters with God and the fulfillment of his promises. As he dies, he is gathered to his people, as he requested, to be buried in the cave of Machpelah beside his ancestors, Abraham and Isaac. Joseph, overwhelmed with grief, falls upon his father, weeping. He orders that Jacob's body be embalmed, a practice in Egypt, and Jacob is mourned for 70 days, honored both as a father and as a patriarch. With Pharaoh's permission, Joseph and his brothers journey to Canaan to fulfill Jacob's final wish. They carry him to the cave of Machpelah, where he is laid to rest. It is a significant moment of closure as the family returns to the land God promised them, even if only to bury their father. In chapter 50, after they return to Egypt, Joseph's brothers are filled with fear. Now that Jacob is gone, they worry that Joseph may seek revenge for their betrayal. They send a message to Joseph asking for forgiveness, claiming it was their father's dying wish. The message breaks Joseph's heart. Despite all he has done for them, they still fear his retribution. In a moment filled with both sadness and grace, Joseph reassures them, saying, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." These words capture the essence of Joseph's life and the story of Genesis as a whole. God's purposes prevail even through human failings, deception, and suffering. Joseph's forgiveness and his trust in God's sovereignty highlight a faith that transcends bitterness and vengeance, a faith rooted in God's enduring promise. As Joseph's life draws to a close, he lives to see his great-grandchildren witnessing the beginnings of a nation. When his own time approaches, he calls his family together and makes them swear to carry his bones back to Canaan, the land God promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Joseph's final act of faith points forward to the hope of a future return, a reminder that Egypt is not their ultimate home. With Joseph's death, Genesis comes to an end, yet the story of God's people is just beginning. The promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob will continue to unfold through their descendants. Genesis has taken us from creation to the founding of a family destined to become a nation. It has shown us humanity's flaws and God's faithfulness, the cycles of sin and redemption, and the unbreakable thread of divine purpose woven through every chapter. As the book closes, we are left with the image of a people in a foreign land, holding on to a promise that one day they will return to the land of Canaan. The legacy of Genesis is one of hope, faith, and the assurance that God is with his people, even in the darkest and most uncertain times. The story will continue through the generations, leading ultimately to a new covenant, a fulfillment of promises through a descendant of Judah, a Savior who will bring reconciliation and life to all. Through every story, every blessing, and every trial, Genesis reminds us of the lasting truth that God's plans are greater than our failures, and his love endures through all generations. Thanks for watching. You can click the video on the screen to continue learning more about Scripture. May the Lord bless and guide your day.